Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah, wa ala nabiyyina Muhammad, wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Allahumma inna nas'aluka ilman nafi'a, wa rizqan tayyiba, wa amalan mutaqabbala. Allahumma faqihna fi ad-din, wa allimna at-ta'wil, ya Rabbal alameen. Today, inshallah, we are starting the chapter of Zakaat. قال المصنف رحمه الله, the author rahimahullah, he says, Kitab al-Zakat, the book of Zakat. Zakat is one of the 5 pillars of Islam. And it is one of the things which the ulama of Islam have agreed upon, that it is from the fara'id or the wajibat of Islam. Meaning that every single person that reaches the requirements must do this ibadah, must pay their zakat. And there is no difference of opinion in terms of zakat. There are many masail in fiqh where there may be a difference of opinion. Some of the scholars may say this is wajib, this is mustahab. For zakat, this is one of the main pillars of Islam, and a person that leaves off the zakat, a lot of the scholars actually consider them not in the fold of Islam. It is that serious. And it is so serious that Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, when there was a party that a group of people that decided not to pay the zakat after the Prophet ﷺ died, he waged a war against them. Right? Meaning he considered them to be out of the fold of Islam because he was waging a war. Obviously, there would be killing involved, right? So zakat is one of those ibadat, one of the 5 pillars of Islam, which are mandatory upon those that reach the requirements. Now the author rahimahullah, he starts talking about zakat and he says, وَهِيَ وَاجِبَةٌ عَلَى كُلِّ مُسْلِمٍ حُرٍّ مَلَكَ نِصَابًا مِلْكًا تَامًا. He says, zakat is wajib, it is mandatory upon every Muslim that is free, that owns the nisab with a complete ownership. And inshallah we'll go over the different nisabs or nisabat in the chapter of zakat. But the nisab is the minimum amount of wealth in that type of category. So that type of category for the wealth is the minimum amount that a person is required to have in order to start paying zakat on. And there are different types of nisab for different types of wealth. For example, for sheep, there is a different type of nisab. If you own a certain amount of sheep, then you need to pay zakat. If you own less than this amount, no zakat is needed. For wealth, for gold and silver, or for monetary funds that we have, there is a nisab. For camels, there is a nisab. Right? So each category of wealth has its own category of nisab. The author rahimahullah, he also says that he mentions the category or the who it is wajib upon, and he says it is kulli muslimin hurran malaka nisaban. So every Muslim, and here the scholars have mentioned that the zakah is not wajib upon, the zakah is a haqq of the mal, is a haqq of the wealth. So every person, the Muslim, he does not have to reach the age of puberty or have to reach certain conditions. As long as he has the amount, the minimum amount of wealth, then it is wajib upon his wealth. So even if a child has a large amount of wealth which is over the nisab, then zakat should be taken from his wealth as well. Right? Hurran, a person that is free. So a person that is a slave, he does not have to pay zakat. Right? A slave does not have to pay zakat because slaves, they don't have the ability to own. Right? They are actually owned by others. Milkan tamman, meaning a complete ownership. So a person, the person must have a complete ownership of the wealth. For example, the mukataba, the person, the slave that is purchasing himself. He has made a contract with his owner to purchase himself. This person is called a mukatib. He is a person that has a contract to purchase his freedom. He has what is called a incomplete ownership of wealth, because he is a slave himself, but his owner has allowed him to go and work and save the money up and pay for his freedom. So he has partial ownership of his wealth, not complete ownership. So in that case, he does not have to pay zakat. The author, rahimahullah, he continues and he says, وَلَا زَكَاةَ فِي مَالٍ حَتَّى يَحُولَ عَلَيْهِ الْحَوْلِ إِلَّا الْخَارِجَ مِنَ الْأَرْضِ وَنَمَاءَ نِصَابِ من نتائج أو من نتاج والربح فإن حولهما حول أصلهما. The author, rahimahullah, he says that there is no zakat on property or on wealth until an entire hawl, until an entire year has passed, except for that which comes from the land. And we'll go into a little bit more detail in this, inshallah. So the zakah, one of the conditions of zakah is hawl, meaning that you possess that wealth for an entire year, right? So if you possess that amount for an entire year, that is when the zakah becomes wajib. It does not become wajib just by you possessing the minimum amount. Rather, you need to possess that amount or above the nisab for an entire year. After that year, then it becomes wajib. Then the zakah becomes wajib. And he says an exception here, except for that which comes from the land. So that which comes from the land, including treasure. So if you find treasure, there is a certain zakah that is due right away. When you reap your crops, there is a certain zakah that is due right away, as long as it is more than the nisab. So, for example, dates, different type of crops, there is a zakah for them if it reaches the nisab. If it reaches the nisab, and you do not have to possess it for 1 year or more. Right? Also, the growth emanating from capital through birth as livestock or profit. So, for example, if you own 100 sheep, right, and after a few months, this 100 sheep, it grows, it increases, right? It increases. So the amount of zakat that you have to pay is not on the actual capital, but it's on the total amount at the end of the year, even though you have not made hawl of that amount. So for example, January 1st, or for example, the 1st of Muharram, you own 100 sheep, right? After 2 months, it grows and it's maybe 110 sheep now, right? The next year comes Muharram 1st of Muharram, you have to pay zakat on the entire amount of sheep you have. Maybe at that time it increases, now it's 120 sheep. However, that 20 sheep, you did not own it for an entire year, but it is tabi', it follows the same hukum as the asl, as its origin. So that amount, it didn't go past the entire year yet, but you still have to pay zakat on it. And that is also with profit from doing business. For example, if you own a store and you start off with $100,000 worth of goods, after 1 year you end up with maybe $150,000 worth, because you kept it kept increasing and increasing. You buy, you sell, and maybe it's over 150,000. Now you pay on the entire amount, the zakat, even though there may be a portion of that has not circulated that entire hawl as of yet. The author, rahimahullah, and we'll conclude with this, he then mentions the zakatable wealth. So the type of properties which there is zakat on, right? So he says, وَلَا تَجِبُ الزَّكَاةُ إِلَّا فِي أَرْبَعَةِ أَنْوَاعٍ. and there is no zakah except on 4 categories of property or wealth. Number 1, as-sa'ima min bahimat al-an'am, free grazing domesticated livestock. The first is as-sa'ima min bahimat al-an'am, and that is livestock which you allow to graze in the earth naturally, and you do not bring their food, right? So the livestock, sheep, goat, cows that you allow to graze, there is zakah on those. And we'll talk about the nisab, the minimum requirement for that. However, if you own, there are some places, for example, in Medina, right, in Mecca, places where there's not much, greenery. What do? The owners of the livestock, they own them and they have them in a small cage or a small area, and they bring food for them. They go and they buy hay, or they buy food and they bring it to them, right? In that case, there is no zakat on those animals. It has to be free grazing. Number 2 is wal kharij min al ard, and that is produced or extracted from the land. Number 3 is wal athman, gold and silver, anything that is considered a currency. And the 4th is urud at-tijara, merchandise prepared for sale. So merchandise, so items that you've purchased not because you want those items, but the intent is you purchase them to sell them back at a higher price and to do business with them. And we'll end off here today, inshallah. وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.